Hey guys, welcome to today's episode of the coffee course. It's a beautiful day, we brought it outside, so we're going to talk about iced coffee, in particular Japanese style iced coffee. This is going to feel familiar to V60 or Chemex with a few little changes. We'll start brewing and we'll talk through some of it as we go. So first off, wet your filter paper as ever. For a change, don't do this in the vessel, you don't want to preheat this. You're going to replace about 35 to 45% of your brewing water with ice. So we have our ice here to hand. We're going to use 200 grams of ice and we're going to use 300 mils of brewing water. So with this, we are changing a little bit our ratios as well. We're actually going to change to 65 grams of coffee per litre. We're also going to change how we grind our coffee. We want to have it a little bit finer than the traditional Chemex or V60 brew. So, whenever the wind stops, pour your ground coffee, as ever, into your filter. And from here, it's very similar. We're going to take our brewing water, about 90 degrees. We're going to bloom our coffee. Our bloom is going to be 2 to 3 times the volume of coffee. So, with the 65 gram per litre recipe for this iced coffee, I have 32 grams of ground coffee in here with 500 ml total brewing liquid between ice and water. Okay, so now that we're ready, we're going to take about a bloom time of about 45 seconds with 60 to 90 ml of the brewing water. Take your scales, start your timer, and then begin. Now you want to try and push the brewing time overall to about 2.5 to 3 minutes. If you can do this, it's a lot easier to do with a brewing vessel like this, with a swan neck kettle. You can use a regular kettle, it'll be a little more difficult to kind of feed that water in slower. So if you have anything with a smaller spout, go for that for sure. I'm going to wait for the long bloom time of about 45 seconds, and then unlike in other brew processes, we're going to top it straight up to the total 300 ml of water in one go. So we're just about hitting the 45 second mark now, so we're going to continue to pour in the rest of the water. Just keep filling this up until you hit your mark, 300 ml of water. And once this is done, it's simply a matter of waiting for all this to travel through and melt to the extent of the ice. So you can probably see it's already starting to melt. So while that's happening, let's talk a little bit about our recipes. Increased volume of coffee, 65 grams per litre. Changing the grind size a little bit, pushing it a little bit more towards fine, maybe one notch in your grinder towards fine away from the usual filter grind. And then between 35 and 45% of the total brew volume should be ice. Now, that will vary depending on your own taste, but it'll also depend on the temperature of the ice. So ice can vary a bit. You may be as low as minus 21 on a home freezer. It may only be minus 18, or dedicated ice machines actually don't run as cold as that. So you will need to experiment a little bit with whatever you have available to see what's the right quantity of ice for you. Effectively, once you've hit the 2.5 minute mark and all of this liquid has travelled through, you then want to be able to swirl this vessel enough that all of this ice will melt in the brewing liquid that's in here. Why do we grind the coffee a little bit finer? This is the bit where people sometimes get a little bit confused. Grinding it finer gives more overall surface area for the brewing water to be in contact with. So you have a decreased brewing time, but what you do have is more surface area in which to also have that decreased brewing time of the decreased volume of liquid. If you think about a traditional V60 or Chemex recipe, you will have 500 ml of brewing water to get in contact with 60 ml of water. We're now dropping that down to 300 ml of water, a slight increase in the volume of coffee, but it's also not going to take as long to travel through. So really what you're looking to do is remember that this is iced coffee. You're going to have cold coffee. You're not going to have as powerful an aromatic. You're not going to have as powerful an extraction. You need to give it every opportunity you can to get the best out of it. So we've just hit the 3 minute mark. That's all pretty much gone through now. So as I said, from here on, swirl it as best as you can and melt all that ice. So we're going to wait a minute for this to melt, and then we're going to pour it over some ice. So again, there's an element of dilution here. You're going to take this fully dissolved liquid, pour it over ice again. You're probably going to be drinking it on a hot day, so there's a good chance that's going to melt a little bit before you finish it. So that's why you need to have a stronger volume of coffee here. One thing you may notice as this dissolves is there will be some little trace elements of what look like oil in the glass. That's natural, that will happen. You are taking ice and diluting it down with hot water. You will have some oily elements. Even when you pour this out, you're going to see a little bit of the slick left in the glass. That's absolutely fine, that's completely normal. As you can see, it's taking a little bit longer than normal to dissolve. So in this scenario, what I would do here is I would now change my volume of ice. I would probably drop it down to maybe 35% of the overall brew ratio in order to make sure this dissolves as quickly as possible. So let's go talk to Tom and get his thoughts on Japanese iced coffee. So guys, that was Japanese iced coffee. I'm glad to say Tom is able to join me on the phone here again to have a bit of a chat. Tom, how are you?
I'm good, Jeff. How are you?
I'm not too bad at all. So Tom, let's talk a little bit about that. What were you thinking?
Yeah,
did you try it yourself?
Learned a lot from that as well. I had been, because of the good weather, we had been trying out Japanese iced coffee this week. I just have a couple of questions to ask you, really. Seeing as you're the kind of cold brew expert, we have, first off, Jeff, why is it called, do you know why it's called Japanese iced coffee? Why isn't it called My Cullen iced coffee? Or
I'm working on that trademark at the moment, Tom, you know.
Yeah.
It's just primarily because it actually became quite popular in Japan first. That's where it sort of became established, and so it became known as that. Some people may call it flash coffee as well. It depends. There's a few different names for it, but that's the most common one out there.
Yeah. Then, in terms of, we saw last week you did cold brew coffee. What are the main differences between Japanese iced coffee and cold brew, in your opinion?
Yeah. So again, the process seems a little unusual because it seems like it's half a cold brew and half a filter. But really, what you're doing is you're taking the best elements of a filter coffee and then flash chilling it. So you will get a different profile again. It's like a halfway house between filter coffee and cold brew.
Oh.
It extracts a wider range of flavors, but still takes less time, you know?
Yeah.
Some people find cold brew, I mean, I'm a big fan of it. Some people find that it doesn't have enough complexity for them. I think it depends on the nature of that drink. I think for me, I love cold brew because it's a perfect drink for that type of weather. But I guess this is a good option for someone who wants to enjoy the benefit of cold coffee, but still get the flavor profile of a filter.
Yeah, it's instantaneous as well. The fact that you can just do it right.
Yeah,
you know,
pretty
you can make
much.
it just as much as you can make a Chemex. Just put your ice in, and there you go. You've got an instant, really good cup of
Exactly.
coffee, of cold brew coffee.
Exactly.
That's great, isn't it?
And as I mentioned during the video, you probably will end up serving it over ice and diluting anyways. So you could always make this particular coffee and leave it in the fridge in a big batch, and then whenever you're ready to drink it, just throw it over a bit of ice and you're good to go, you know?
Yeah, delicious. We see you were using a Hario, or you were using a V60 in the video.
So I was using a range server Hario. So it's actually an interesting product. It's a glass jar similar to a Chemex, not as stylish looking, but the insert sits into it, and it's a shape that uses the same V60 papers, but you can brew in the fashion you would in a Chemex. Now, you wouldn't be able to brew more than maybe 3 cups. I tried to brew 4 cups there recently, and I was fairly pushing it to the limit as regards filling the filter paper, but it's effective, it's fast, and it's great because you're straight into a serving vessel then as well.
And the last thing I wanted to ask you about was your ratios. I see you used a little bit more coffee this time. Used 65 grams, it seems, to your 50 mil. So you're using 16.5 to 1 ratio. Did you try push that out, or? I kind of started around there. It's a pretty good standard, push it up a little bit. As we mentioned during the video, standard would be about 60 grams per litre. The 65 is because you have a decreased brewing time and you have a decreased volume of hot water in contact with the coffee. So you do need to extract it a little bit more from it. You could go higher, but I wouldn't go much higher because, again, you're going to get into a very different scenario there if you push it above, say, 70 grams or so per litre. Yeah. You added that 5 grams on extra, you're always going to get... The thing I like about Japanese iced coffee is that you start off with a little bit more concentrated coffee, and as the ice melts, I see you waited for your ice to dilute, but then you were going to pour it over ice anyway, and the coffee seems to change as you drink it, as it melts, the extra added ice to serve. And it's interesting to taste coffee as it melts more and more and dilutes more and more in ice. You get all these different complex flavors coming through. So I seem to kind of brew as well on a little higher strength as well. It's better to have a little bit more strength than to be a bit weaker, it seems.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because it always gives you options. You could in fact use maybe larger pieces of ice that melts slower and stays above the brew coffee for a bit longer, you know. Like, again, no more than with the cold brew last week, there's so many variants on this. I mean, that's a pretty good solid method to get a consistent cup of coffee, but feel free to change those ratios. Now, I would try and keep it within the barrier of 35 to 45% overall.
Okay.
But some of that will vary depending on the ice temperature as well. And as I said, some of those domestic ice freezers at home in your fridge could be set as low as minus 21. So you do have to allow for that.
Yeah. The last thing, I suppose, is just, we're not stuck to our V60s or our Harios. We can also use AirPress, which is great. I tried out this week.
Yeah.
So just keep it at ratio 1:17, 1:18 usually, and you still get a really good cup of coffee. It's a little bit more sediment in it, but just as tasty, I think.
Yeah, and the AirPress method is quite interesting because it actually opens up loads of options using the AirPress. You could actually use the AirPress as an ice drip as well. I've seen people that have, fill their AirPress with their ground coffee and have it on the vessel below, and then they've set up something to drip through it. So you could actually just have a bowl with a hole that has ice melting in it and slowly drips through and travels through. And again, that's another type of cold brew, but that's different. Again, what you're getting there is not quite long-term cold brew because it's not in contact with the coffee for as long.
Yeah.
It has a bit of a quality of each. That's one that's very interesting to try out as well.
Wow. It's limitless, really.
Cold brew is so many options.
Yeah. Wow.
So many options.
Great. Thanks a million for taking us through it this week, Jeff. Once again, I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you, but of course the circumstances.
That's it. I think we're going to have to do a few more episodes like this, Tom, it seems, but that's okay. It's going well so far.
Yeah, it's great. It's great not seeing you, Jeff.
Same as that, Tom. Same as that. So I think that's pretty much it for Japanese iced coffee, and we'll be back soon with another episode.
Great. Thanks, guys. I've been Tom from Pangea Coffee Culture.
And I'm Jeff from Tree Bark Store, and as ever, feel free to get in touch with any questions.